everyone, and welcome to another episode of Money Matters with Doug Jones, the personal finance show focused on moving you forward financially. Well, it's that time of year again. Our kids are going to be returning to school, and the Ford government has announced that they're going to try to return to as close as possible to pre-pandemic levels. So that means parents are going to need to get out and do the back-to-school shopping. That, of course, creates stress for a lot of people. And so the focus of today's show is going to be about back-to-school shopping on a budget and some tips and tricks on how to stay on that budget. And joining us today, we have Julie Cole. Now, Julie's name may be familiar to many of you because she's a regular contributor on television. But in addition, and I'm going to actually look at my notes, Julie, because you do a lot of stuff. Julie is a former lawyer. She's a mother of 6. She's a requested speaker. She's a syndicated blogger on Huffington Post, Parenting.com, Today's Parent, Scary Mom, Globe and Mail, Savvy Mom, Forbes, Working Mother Magazine. She's also one of the founders of Mabel's Labels. She's also the founder and host of a live parenting show called Mabel's Mom Cave on Facebook, and she has her own blog, The Mabelhood. Julie, you are a very busy person, so welcome to the show.
Thank you. Sometimes when I hear my bio, I'm like, that's why I'm tired.
Exactly. Well, again, thank you for joining us. And maybe you could expand a bit on your bio. I've sort of given the highlights that I know, but maybe you could sort of talk about going from being, I think you called yourself a recovering lawyer to a parenting expert.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, it's been quite a journey, I can tell you. So I say I'm a recovered lawyer, just like tongue in cheek, because I'm not practicing. And that is because of a couple of reasons. I started Mabel's Labels 18 years ago, and I started it for basically 2 reasons. One was that with my co-founders, we just had a really good product idea. We had little kids and we were using like masking tape and permanent marker on our kids' stuff, and it wasn't working. We thought there's got to be really good, durable dishwasher, microwave safe labels out there, and there weren't. So like good entrepreneurial mamas, we created the business that we needed, find a gap and fill it. And the other reason at that point was my eldest child was 3 and he was diagnosed with autism. And I really wanted to be able to provide a very good therapy program for him, advocate for him. And he already actually had 2 little sisters by then. So it was a busy household already. So I didn't think the traditional workforce was going to suit me. So those were my 2 whys, like wanting to leave the traditional workforce and also filling a gap in the marketplace. And then, of course, I also, on top of the whole law thing, I also have a master's in education. So I've always been very interested in kids and learning and education. So, along my journey with Mabel's and having my kids and with my background, I've just really been a part of the parenting space. I've been blogging for years. As you mentioned, I'm a parenting contributor on things like breakfast television. I'm a regular segment on CH Morning Live and that sort of thing. And it's just one of those things that kind of happened along the way. And it's been a lot of fun and no looking back now.
Well, that's awesome. And it certainly makes you a parenting expert, which is really going to assist us as we sort of talk about our return to school and budgeting. So I'd like to sort of get into that topic now. So as I noted at the start, Ford's announced that the kids are returning to class. And as they're returning to class, parents are going to need to start to do their back to school shopping. And there's a recent survey that came out by an organization, Retail Me Not, which sort of indicated that parents are more than prepared to spend when it comes to going back to school shopping. And 61% of them were saying they're actually looking to spend more. So what I'd like to do is kind of get your thoughts on some of the findings of that survey. So the first one is that it was 59% said that this was a bigger deal this year returning to school, and the majority were happy to have their kids back in class. Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, I think a lot of parents are really ready for those kids. I mean, we all know the struggle it's been, working from home, kids at home, and seeing them missing out on the social opportunities. And some kids haven't, been shining their best with their online learning. And they're more, the kind of learners they are is better in class and live. So I think a lot of parents are feeling anxious. And of course, what goes along with that is that there's that back to school shop. And I think parents are are keen, they're excited. But I would remind parents that kids, will have a good back to school experience without breaking the bank. I think sometimes we put these expectations, we think they need all of the things. And I think this is an important conversation because like what we really need and what we don't necessarily need. And I found this even when people were at home and they thought their kids needed the perfect study space and the perfect tech and the perfect everything. Kids are incredibly they're good learners, and parents, even if they didn't have the perfect environment at home, the kids are fine and they're all going to go back. And the teachers know that some kids excelled in online learning and some didn't. And we can trust that they'll deal with our learners.
Yeah. So that leads into what some of the survey came out with that, I'm an accountant by background. So I was looking at this going, well, what was your number one priority? And it was the kids' happiness.
Yeah.
And the number two priority was items to improve their performance. To me, budgeting was fairly important. And that was number 3 on the list.
You're a good accountant. Well, I think also like with the kids' happiness and the kids performing well at school, these are priorities for parents, particularly now. I think a lot of parents have been very worried about their children's mental health, and wanting them to go back and feel good about it is super important. And I think maybe what in doing this survey, I think parents are feeling like this will help with that transition back to school with all the stuff. And I think too, parents are struggling a little bit because we did our back to school shops last year and it was mostly for naught, like we've got, and I would really suggest that parents look at check out those closets. Like you probably bought clothes and school uniforms that barely got used. You probably have markers and binders. So go through what you have already before you go and overload and buy all this stuff again. Cause like I said, the kids were barely in school last year. We got all this stuff and it's been sitting gathering dust at home. So do a little inventory and see what you've got before you go and do the big spend.
Right, because in that survey, they were suggesting that parents were going to spend up to $1,333 per child. And so I was using a family with 3 kids and went, that's $4,000.
Right.
Well, a lot of parents, suddenly $4,000 into the budget is going to be a tough hurdle to overcome. And so I was looking sort of at that, sort of saying, well, what should the priorities be? And then in the survey, they were like, it was tech and it was getting the room ready. We got a new one in there, PPE, which was down at the bottom. But I wonder if you could comment on some of that stuff you're seeing.
Yeah. So there is that. And I do agree that PPE is a new expense that we never thought about before. We do have to make sure that we've got, face masks. You want to make sure your kid has a water bottle so they're not necessarily going to the water fountain. These are things that parents are concerned about and willing to throw money behind. And I'm finding even with the Mabel's labels, it used to be something that people wanted to avoid the lost and found. They don't want their kids losing their stuff, but now they're really wanting to avoid those germy mix-ups. They don't want somebody grabbing their kids' belongings or using their things. So, we're not so keen to have our kids sharing as we may have liked in the past, right? So we do see that PPE. Of course, the tech is a thing, but again, I just want to remind parents that the schools do have equipment. Your kids don't need the best and the fastest and the greatest. And I know they're going to come home and say, Johnny has this and Janie has that. But, you need to set, I'm with you on the budgeting, set your budget and stick to it. And I know with me and my 6 kids, if they really want something that is beyond the budget, then you need to have some skin in the game. If you really want that, then you can pitch in. And soon as you make them start contributing their own bucks, you'll see what they really want and what they don't really want, because suddenly they're like, how many burgers did I flip for that hour to be able to pay for that? And it makes them kind of reprioritize, which is why I like kids having some sort of financial literacy and contributing. So, and making them I think, involving the kids in the budgeting process, right? There's a huge, I'm sure you are all behind kids in financial literacy and them being involved. These are life lessons. So you know what, sit down with them and create that budget and then make them stick to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with the financial literacy piece. And I want to come to sort of, as we get into the budget more, sort of the tips and tricks. But one of the things I also noticed was some of the stresses parents said they were suffering through, which was they were stressed about finding everything on time. And I've been trying to buy some stuff myself recently and finding that, that is a challenge with the online and everything sold out, and the COVID's the explanation. Also shopping safely. And then again, the worry about the spending. So are you seeing that? Like, the survey actually went on to said that, and I was a bit surprised at this, that with everything we did last year online, they actually said now it was like slightly more, it was 52% preferred to be in the store versus online. And I thought that was a little bit of a disconnect.
I agree. I found that interesting as well, because to me, I mean, if I can do anything from the convenience of my home, I will. But I think that probably speaks to the fact that we have been home and people are itching to get out and actually see things and touch things and, other humans. So I think people are a little anxious to get out and maybe do the shop with their kids. But honestly, like, if you're trying to stick to your budget, I think the first thing you can do, and this is something, to bring into past this back to school season, is to try and buy things off season. Of course they're running out. Shopping for back to school in August? Are you kidding me? Everybody's doing that. So the time to buy this stuff is off season. And honestly, don't take your kids with you, because they're going to be like, I want this, I want that. Have the list, go do it yourself. Otherwise, the kids they're going to end up costing you more. I know for a fact that happens. But also, one of the benefits of online is that, well, first of all, you're not running around and spending money on gas and time and that stuff. But you can also search for online coupons. You can do price comparisons right there online. And another thing that's, I think, super important, a lot of moms are pretty savvy about this, and I would highly recommend, is look for companies that have loyalty programs. And, this is a time to maybe to cash in your loyalty points and that sort of thing. So I do think like a few things to think about right now is, going online, looking at those loyalty points, looking at comparing, looking at online coupons. You can go to any mom's Facebook group and say, hey, does anyone have a coupon code for Avery Binders? And somebody's going to hook you up. Like, we moms are good at this stuff. This is our time to shine. But also, shopping off season is definitely a way to go.
Yeah, I noticed in the survey, they actually, because I assume back to school shopping happened in August. And there was a survey in the US and the one here in Canada that were both saying that it's shifting. People are trying to do it now earlier in the year. And I do know that you recommend sort of get the necessities now, and then later, when everything goes on sale, look to get the remainder. But is that what you're seeing, that the mom groups you're talking to are trying to buy earlier in the season and do that off-season shopping?
Yeah, I think particularly, like, there's a lot of moms out there who really pride themselves in kind of finding the deals. And, I've got lots of friends who, say only fools pay full price. Like, they are determined. They are determined to get the deal on everything, and they won't buy anything without a coupon code and that sort of thing. And definitely they are doing that early shop. And again, to my point earlier, they're pulling out their inventory from last year, because you know what? A lot of that stuff didn't get used. So before you go and rebuy stuff you already have a look in those closets, have a look in those desks, and where you may have stored away the things that didn't get used last year, and dust them off and really see what you've got. And you know what? They don't necessarily need brand new, like, you can sharpen pencil crayons and they can be used. Like, sure, they're a little shorter this year. That's okay. So, really just take stock of what you have before you go and blow your budget on this stuff.
Okay, so we're going to go to break. When we return from the break, let's delve more into all those cost-saving tips for the parents to help them with the budgeting this year. Welcome back to Money Matters with Doug Jones. Today we're talking to Julie Cole, and we're talking about back-to-school shopping and a budget for back-to-school shopping. As we know, the Ford government has announced that we're going to be returning our kids to school. We're going to be trying to get as close as possible to pre-pandemic levels of activity in class. And so that means back to school shopping. And we were sort of talking about a survey that was parents are prepared to spend more this year. Because we're coming out of the pandemic, they're anxious to get the kids into school and back into interacting with their peer group. So there's a renewed emphasis. We're putting a priority on getting our kids ready, but that could create some stresses for us in our budget. And so, Julie, that's what we're talking about, is the budget. And we sort of started talking about it a little bit in the first segment, but I'd like you to expand again on why it's so important, particularly when you have 6 kids you're shopping for. Why is it so important to have a budget before you actually start going online or into the mall?
I think this is and I'm sure, Doug, you would agree with this. I'm just a big believer in budgeting for everything. And, if you don't set that budget, you are going to overspend. You are going on things you don't need. And, at the end of the day, I'm always super mindful too of I don't want so much stuff in my house. I have 6 kids. I don't need more stuff. I don't want stuff ending in landfill. So I don't want to overspend. So, sitting down and creating a budget and involving your kids. So there's that educational piece, really being able to decide what the wants are and the needs are, will help to find what you need to spend. And I mean, who wants to overspend? There's other things I'd rather spend my money on than markers and binders, really. So mommy likes other things. So I think it's about making kids prioritize what their needs are and involving them in the process.
I think you've hit on a key item. I do talk in my day job about budgeting all day long. And the big issue in a budget is distinguishing between wants and needs. And so you've already highlighted on it, and you've actually tied in the financial literacy piece of involving our kids in there. I liked your analogy earlier of how many burgers do I have to flip to get that?
Right.
And that's important. And so can we expand on that? What are you doing? What are you hearing from other parents as to, are they all using this as a financial literacy moment? How to involve their kids, how to teach them, how to get them to think about it?
Yeah. And I think a lot of, savvy parents are doing that. But to your point with the survey, the top thing I believe was that parents just want their kids to be happy. And they think that doing a big spend back to school is going to make them happy. And I know that a lot of kids are feeling anxious about going back to school. They haven't been with their peers in a long time. So parents are trying to smooth that over. And sometimes parents do that with the stuff, right? We do stuff to try and make us feel better. And I always think guilt-driven parenting is not the way to go, right? And I always say I gave up mom guilt 4 kids ago because, if we're buying our kids stuff to make us feel better or help, then we probably need to look at really what the greater issue is with the kids and what are other things we can do to help with this transition to make them feel better. And there are lots of things that we can do around that. So I do think, the whole, and to the burger flipping point, I love when my kids get to an age where they can get a job, because I do love them having to manage money. I think it's important. And I do allowance in my house, but it's not tied to chores because I don't believe that children should get paid for being a contributing member of the family. As soon as I start getting paid to make dinner, then they'll start getting paid to wash the dishes. So, but I do believe in them having some money so that they can learn these financial literacy skills, Doug, that you speak of, right? So I do love when they get a job. I've got a kid now working at a 16-year-old working as a host at a restaurant. So seating people. So, she'll be like, oh, I really want that hoodie, or I really want this, but it's are you willing to work 3 hours seating people at a restaurant to buy that hoodie? Not so much. You really start to learn the wants versus the needs when they have the skin in the game. So I think, sitting them down, and even if they're young and they obviously, don't have a lot of money or they don't have means of getting money, you can say, okay, tell me, what are your top 3 priorities for back to school? Did you want a new backpack? Did you want a new lunchbox? Did you want Mabel's labels? What did you want? What are your priorities? And some kids love the crayons and the colorful and organizing all that stuff. So sit them down and find out what their priorities are and make them miss out on things. It's okay to have them do without. And I know, based on the survey, parents are not wanting that, but it's okay for the kids not to have all the things. And there's a lot of lessons in that. And it's just we always try to set our kids up for success. And I get that, but there's a lot of gift and failure as well. So we don't have to always make things super easy for them, and doing without maybe, making them prioritize helps them learn about wants versus needs. And that certainly comes in handy when you're sitting down trying to do a budget, as you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So to me, it also ties into like when you go, if you don't have the budget, you go, well, you could do that impulse spend. And if you take the kids with you, as you noted, that's going to be even increased pressure,
Yeah.
which kind of ties into that FOMO thing too, because the kids are fear of missing out what their friends have. And so the wants and needs, it's like, I need a hoodie, but do I need that designer label hoodie or do I need a hoodie? And so are you challenging your kids with okay, then you got to put some skin in the game to help afford that? Like I'm willing to pay $20. And if you want the $60 one, you're finding the additional 40.
Love that. And that's exactly how it does. Cause then I found with my own kids, they'll be like, oh, you know what? I guess I don't need that backpack. So you're like, there it is. Right. As soon as you have to pitch in, the truth comes out. Right. So I think there are tricks around that as well. Like, they might want, and I had a kid too. She loved this YouTuber. So she wanted this YouTuber's merch. Well, guess what? 6 months later, she doesn't like that YouTuber anymore. So it's kind of nice because there's the natural consequence. Like she's now learned that lesson. She spent the $40 on some her merch and now she doesn't like that YouTuber anymore. So I'm like, when she goes to want to buy something else, be like, hey, remember that time when you bought that and then you didn't like that YouTuber anymore? So like I do like natural consequences. Sometimes it's okay to let them do a bad spend so that they can learn from it later. But I do find also the kids are pretty creative. So I mean, she doesn't like that YouTuber anymore. So she sold the merch to some kid who does, right? Like, and I do think the kids are getting good at this and they're seeing a lot of us parents do that. Like, I don't want this anymore, but somebody else might want it. So, we're posting on our Facebook buy and sell groups. We're posting there and the kids are doing a lot of, and the teenagers really now are into doing like they love going to the secondhand stores. They love thrift shopping. And then when they're done with their clothes, they'll like package up their clothes and they'll bring it and they'll get money for that. So I love seeing that because I also, like to my point earlier, I love the not filling the landfill stuff, right? Like I love, using things and also like for me as a mom of 6 and for, lots of parents out there, you want to make sure that you do. I'm a big believer in buying quality. I'm not a fast fashion girl. I buy quality because my experience is if I buy a good backpack, they have it for 5 years. So I don't buy backpacks with like, the Little Mermaid on or, branding stuff because they will outgrow that right. Or they will change their mind on that. So I will buy a good backpack that's a decent brand with no kind of merch on the outside. And they will use that backpack. I washed out and they use it for years and years and years. And also I want a good hand-me-down situation. So right. I'll buy the good clothes so that, when the kid outgrows that, it'll go to little brother or little sister. And I buy gender neutral things because I just want whatever, if I've got kids who are boys, I've got kids who are girls, I have a kid who's non-binary. So I want to make sure that all of them are comfortable using whatever. So I just find that if I buy quality and if I buy gender neutral and, then I get more out of it. It's got more longevity, right?
All right. So you're getting into some tricks and tips for the parents on, when you're going out, like you can buy the quality, you can pass it down, non-gender specific, get rid of the fashion trend or the current fashion trend. Yeah. I think you also, we've talked about before, like go through and take inventory of what you've got. I think one of the other tricks was get the list from the school as to what the kid actually needs.
100%. I mean, don't go rogue here, moms. Do not go rogue. Don't think you know what they need. The schools are very good. They will provide you a list. They will say exactly what is needed. So that's also a great starting point to your budget, right? You can be like, okay, what does the school say we actually need? Okay, what have we already got? Okay, what did Big Brother outgrow? That might be in his closet that we can move to your closet this year. So go to the list, see what you need, and then be specific about what you need and only buy that. And that's how you're going to be able to stick to your budget.
All right. And then you've also talked about comparison shopping and coupon shopping. And so I think we've given some parents some really good ideas to consider.
Yeah.
There's another thing that comes up though at this time of year. And that is, it always seems to start about the same time as the school year, and that's extracurricular activities.
Right.
So I've had a couple of kids. We've been through all the extracurricular activities.
6 kids in hockey.
So what's your advice there? Because extracurriculars can get quite expensive, and sometimes you go in not realizing what the true cost is going to be.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Extracurriculars can be very expensive. And I think through COVID, there's been some lessons. And that might be that maybe our kids don't need to be as overprogrammed as they once were. Like I actually kind of liked not going to the hockey arena every single night of my life through COVID, right? So I think, it's a great time, again, about prioritizing and budgeting and saying to your kids, okay, you get one sport a season. What's it going to be? Or you want to do dance, or you don't get to do all the things. They don't have to do all the things. You know what they can do? They can play outside. They can get a paper route. There are things that they can do that they're not totally overprogrammed. So you can set a family budget. And some of the things that I've done that have been super helpful is that sometimes when I put my kids in a similar activity, there'll be a family discount. I also, from a practical standpoint, love when I can get kids on the same hockey team so that I'm only going to the arena, two birds, one stone, right? Like I love kind of, if I can kind of combine the kids and activities and that works just for our family lifestyle as well. And plus the siblings do really like doing things together. And again, like we talked about with the shopping off season, get those early bird specials. Like if I sign my kids up for hockey at the end of the season, then I get like $50 off. Or if I pay all my dance fees up front in September, then I don't get charged tax or whatever. Like sometimes if you can kind of almost do the buy in bulk or early bird specials, then there can be a benefit there. But I do want to remind parents that there were lessons through COVID that they don't have to do all the things. They can slow down, we can slow down. And I think a lot of families, that's been a real eye opener. And although I do feel sorry for a lot of these organizations, right, that have been struggling through COVID and waiting for the kids to come back. But certainly it's time to sit down and budget, to your point, Doug, like budget about extracurriculars as well.
Well, that's great advice. So now, thank you for joining us today. What I would like to know is if parents want to follow your blog, how do they follow you, get advice from you?
Great. Okay. So you can go to mabelslabels.com/Julie Cole. And there you'll see a bunch of my blogs, a bunch of my media, a bunch of my reels. And of course, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on all the social things. So you can find me there, but probably a great starting point is mabelslabels.com.
Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks to you, the viewers, for watching today. And if you have any questions or comments about today's show or suggestions for future shows, you can go to the Rogers homepage, click on the show link, and email us.